my friends and fellow VEDSies. Welcome to day 10 or 11 of the month. I'm not sure exactly what day this is going to go up. I'm basically going to be redoing a video I did once before here. In 2019, I did a video all on legendary Canadian bandleader Dal Richards. Now, he has, for my money, one of the most amazing career trajectories of any musician ever, and just the most incredible longevity. And you know, when I first made that video 5 years ago, it did not get very many views at all. And Dal Richards is one of those people that I just wish more people knew about. Because even though he's really only a regional phenomenon, gaining success for his shows in and around Vancouver, but he's a true icon locally here. So let's talk about his amazing career. Dal Richards was born on January 5th, 1918. He graduated from high school in 1935. He had been in a band, in a big band, already striving to be a band leader. And right out of high school in 1935, or shortly thereafter, he founds the original incarnation of the Dal Richards Orchestra. Dal Richards was known for doing a New Year's Eve show every year. Starting in the mid to late 1930s. Also in the late 30s, he started playing every single year at the PNE. But yeah, both of those annual gigs began in the 1930s, and later on in the video, I'm going to get to just how long he kept up those monthly residencies. It's amazing. He got perhaps his most legendary gig in 1940, when he was in his early 20s, where his group, the Dal Richards Orchestra, was hired to be the new, essentially, house band, playing the very prestigious panorama roof up high on top of the Hotel Vancouver downtown. Now, not only was this an amazing gig, but it also was broadcast every week by CBC Radio. And people would sit and listen every week to the radio program being broadcast from high atop the Hotel Vancouver at the Panorama Room. And it was always Dal Richards and his band. He had special guests with him here and there. Whatever touring musician was making a stop in Vancouver, including the really big names. I know Bing Crosby and Roy Rogers and a few other huge names came in to do guest spots with him on that show. All through the 1940s, all through the 1950s, all the way until 1965, you could hear Dal. And in the interim, his band is majorly in demand, playing everywhere that'll have him, in BC and elsewhere. He's a touring musician as well. Also during this time, he picks up a job as the band leader for the BC Lions of the CFL. I have read conflicting reports as to whether or not he wrote the BC Lions fight song. I know his band performed the BC Lions fight song, Roar You Lions Roar. I've seen some articles stating that he wrote the music for that, and some saying that he didn't, but in any case, his band performed that song at all BC Lions games for, I believe he held that job for 32 years. And it's crazy to think that these jobs that he had for 25 years, or 32 years in the case of the BC Lions job, are just small chapters in his insanely long career. Now, in the 1950s and 1960s, tastes started to change. Times were changing in the world of music. Rock and roll came along in the mid-50s, and that was all teenagers would care about suddenly. In the early 60s, swing was still king, as they say. Dal was still on top of the world, but the Beatles played an interesting role in, unfortunately, the demise of swing music and big band jazz music, in terms of being at the forefront of pop culture. And Dal would have witnessed this firsthand when the Beatles came to Empire Stadium in Vancouver in August of 1964. It was their only Vancouver concert they ever played, one of their few Canadian concerts they ever played, and they had a whole lineup of musicians. It included the Righteous Brothers. It would have been awesome. But right down at the very start of the bill was Dal Richards and his orchestra, who played for the crowd basically as they were filing in. He was the first act up that night, and I don't know, there's something really symbolic about that. That he is entertaining the crowd as they file into the stadium before the Beatles took over. And boy, did they take over. Unfortunately, within a year, it would spell almost disaster for Dal and his band. He was still getting gigs, don't get me wrong, but in 1965 he lost that job. The CBC discontinued the program from his performances at the Hotel Vancouver. This is all anecdotal, but I've read people say that for the rest of his life, Dal hated rock and roll. He refused to listen to any rock and roll music and stayed rooted in his era. But he had to figure out something to do. He wasn't making the kind of money he used to make. So in 1966, he did what any good musician would do in this situation. And he got a job he took a course in hotel management and was running hotels through the 70s and keeping up his band gigs. But thankfully for Dal, and thanks to some great nostalgia that the people of Vancouver hold for his music, he had quite the resurgence in the first half of the 1980s, releasing two very successful albums, the Swing Is In albums from 1982 and 1983 respectfully, and they really put him back on the map. Throughout the 60s and 70s, when he wasn't in his heyday, so to speak, he was still doing things like making his annual performances every New Year's Eve, and his annual performances twice a day at the PNE. And yeah, he played during Expo 86, fittingly, when the Expo came to Vancouver, and just, again, became a staple. Now, don't forget, as I mentioned, he was born in 1918. So by this resurgence in the 1980s, Dal is already in his 60s and absolutely nowhere even close to the end of his career. One other thing here that I should mention about this era in Dal Richards' career is at some point here in, like, I'm assuming late 90s, early 2000s or something like that, this kid named Michael Bublé performs at this PNE talent show that is being judged by Dal Richards, and he gives him top marks and he wins the contest, and a lot of people to this day will credit Dal Richards for discovering Michael Bublé, because after that he not only loved his performance in this talent show, but he took him under his wing, and Michael would sing with the Dal Richards Orchestra here and there before he was ever famous. Michael Bublé, of course, Vancouver kid, to this day with some glowing words for Dal Richards and his place in our city's musical history. When I was growing up, I always remember when you'd go to the PNE, one of the first things that would take place, the PNE would always open at 11, and sometime in approximately the 12 o'clock hour, the Dal Richards Orchestra would do their first performance of the day, and they'd do another a couple hours later and be done for their day, something like 3 or 3:30 or something. I had no idea that we were watching a man who at that point, when I was a kid, was in his 80s, who was a big star for the real glory days of swing and jazz. In 2008, he celebrated his, get this, 90th birthday with a sold-out show at Vancouver's legendary Orpheum Theatre. You'd think that maybe he would take this opportunity to announce his retirement, but oh boy was he not finished yet. After undergoing knee surgery in 2009, he was able to move around a lot easier, and he celebrated his newfound spry energy by doing just the most amazing thing. He was a torchbearer in the 2010 Olympic Winter Games at 92. At 92, he insisted on, they were like, you can just walk if you want to, but he insisted on running. He trained for the event, and it's so great that he was able to be involved with those Olympic Games in some regard, because really, anytime a major event had come to Vancouver in the last, 60, 70 years or so, Dal and his band were there. At some point in the early 2010s, I had an internship at the ACT Theatre, the little theater in town here in Maple Ridge, and I would do whatever they needed me to do that day. For some smaller productions, I would even run lights, even though I had no idea what I was doing. But mostly I was working backstage as a runner and helping people with just about anything they needed. I did that for a year, and the concert I was most excited for was Dal Richards' annual Remembrance Day show. November 11th, he did a show every year at the ACT Theatre, and I was there working the show. So I was backstage to watch him enter the premises and load in, and I just considered him such a legend at this point that it was an honor for me. Dal would have been like 93, 94 at this point. What I remember from that night is when Dal came in and was wandering around backstage, I was like, oh, like I know him from his like charisma on stage and stuff, but he is getting to be quite an old man. He is getting up there in years, of course, and I know he was starting to lose his hearing, so you had to really speak up if he was going to hear you. And I was like, oh, could we be like nearing the end of his illustrious career? So sad, blah blah blah. And I've never been more impressed than seeing the curtain open from out. I was at the sound. I wasn't running the sound booth for Dal, but I was at the sound booth when he came out, and he was able to switch and turn it on. I guess he'd done so many thousands of gigs over the past like 75 years. He's such a consummate professional. You would never have known he was 93, 94, or however old he was when he hit that stage. He was like a young man up there, totally laughing and joking with the audience, and to watch him be able to turn that on was one of the most amazing things I have ever seen. In 2013, the city of Vancouver named him an honorary Hepcat laureate for the occasion of his 95th birthday. At the age of 95 in 2013, he still underwent a full series of concerts and did it again in 2014. For his 2014 concert calendar, by which point he was 96 years old, he started to bill his performances as farewell performances, that this would be his last year touring. Again, his career dating back to the 1930s. It is cool that he was able to kind of go out on his own terms with one last year of shows. One little farewell tour, so to speak. By the way, I'm a musician. Dal Richards, at the age of 96, doing a farewell tour in 2014 is the equivalent of me doing a farewell tour in 2092. Like, I'll be 96, God willing, in 2092. Man, I hope I have some 2092 tour dates. That would be amazing. But Dal, in 2014, played his regular calendar of shows, including his 75th year at the Peony. And I think it's just an awesome touch that they have included a little plaque / display for him. An icon of the Canadian music industry, Dal Richards' music and famous words, "Keep Swinging," have been rooted into the hearts of Pacific National Exhibition fairgoers for the past 75 years. This was presented for his last performances here in 2014. November 11th of that year, he came one last time to Maple Ridge, to the Act Theatre, and I had to see Dal live one last time. At 96 years and 10 months, Dal Richards still put on a phenomenal show. There are two moments from that concert that I will never forget. One is Dal, he's doing wartime songs for Remembrance Day, and he asked the audience, hey, is there anybody out here who was alive during World War I? I swear, not a single hand went up. But Dal says, I was born during World War I. I was alive in World War I, and got a big applause out of the audience. He was legitimately the oldest person in the room and the one entertaining us all. Later on in the show, as he was doing his bow and curtain call, someone up near the front, because it was scheduled as his last show in Maple Ridge, someone up front yelled, "Come here next year, come back next year," and Dal, without missing a beat, goes up to the mic and says, well, I'll try to organize a second coming, but I have no promises. The next month, for New Year's, he performed his, get this is going to blow your mind, his 79th annual, 79 years, he did a New Year's Eve show in Vancouver. And, he did one last one to usher in the new year of 2015, went off without a hitch, and even though Dal was retiring, he really wanted to get back the following year to make it an even 80. One thing that's such a shame is him and his people tried during the later years of his life to get some sort of acknowledgement from Guinness Book of World Records, because no one else has played 79 consecutive New Year's Eve shows. That's insane. They unfortunately did not have the proper receipts from the early shows. He didn't keep, oddly enough, he didn't have his invoices from 1936 laying around. So they weren't able to, he was never included in Guinness Book of World Records, which is a shame because he deserves to be. Dal turned 97 on January 5th, 2015, and by all accounts he spent his last year mostly slowing down a little bit, very deliberately, to be with his family. But I've seen a few interviews with him from that year, and even some performance footage. It seems that he performed during the City of Whistler's summer concert series at some point during the summer in August of 2015, which could very well be his last ever performance. He did not play at the PNE that year. He made it in even 75. I know 75 is an odd number. You know what I mean. But yes, his longevity is incredible. When they wanted to do a piece on the 80th anniversary of the Kitsilano Showboat, they interviewed Dal because he performed at the inaugural festivities 80 years earlier. Anyway, Dal had one last New Year's Eve show on the calendar to ring in 2016, but as the show got closer, his health declined and he unfortunately had to cancel. So he didn't get that 80th New Year's Eve show, but technically he never missed a New Year's Eve show. I feel like he made sure of it. Dal Richards unfortunately passed away on December 31st, 2015 at 11:41 p.m., according to an article I read. I don't know. I think it's just fascinating that at the end of the day, he never missed a New Year's Eve show. He never let the record show that he couldn't make it that year. He unfortunately passed December 31st, 2015, leaving an incredible legacy, and that's why I really wanted to do this video again. I know there are so many people in Vancouver who remember his legacy and memory, but he's just not one of those artists that I feel like people are actively studying the way they should. He had such a legacy. There's a wealth of information on him out there, and as a greater Vancouverite growing up in the 2000s and 2010s, I was pretty much the last generation to get a chance to see him do what he loved to do. One time I reached out to his an email address that was on his website saying that I was such a fan, and at the time I would have been a teenager. And I'm still kicking myself. If only I had a channel back in those days, because he actually did email me back saying we should arrange to meet up or something, that he was honored to have a fan so young, and I got too nervous and I never responded. So I will always kick myself for that. But Dal Richards, a Vancouver legend, and I just, more than almost any other musician out there, I feel obligated to tell his story because it's amazing, and it had better not be forgotten because he is such an icon. That's going to do it for this video. I'm going to make a video every day this month. Me and 6 other people are doing that as part of Video Every Day in September. Their awesome channels can be found in the description. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble about a true icon, Dal Richards. I will talk to you guys again tomorrow and every day for the rest of this month.